In this video we'll be addressing the OCR or GCSE History question, what is the message of this cartoon? And it's a 6-point question. As you can see, this is a cartoon, as it says at the bottom, a cartoon published in a German magazine called Simplicissimus, and this is in June 1919, and the context of that is really important for understanding the overall message of the cartoon. So of course, when thinking about answering an exam style question, we need to consider the mark scheme. And of course you should be increasingly familiarising yourself now with the mark scheme. So 1 to 2 marks out of 6, you simply answer the question. This might be in a sentence or two where you consider and explain what the message of the cartoon is. But you don't actually use any of the source details to back your answer up. When considering the source details, look at everything that's within the cartoon and of course the writing that accompanies it. You will need to think about facial expressions, body posture, some of the objects that are used in the cartoon. And of course for the higher marks you'll need to consider the contextual knowledge, essentially what was going on at the time. That will help you to get the full marks that we're all hoping for. So the contextual knowledge from the period in question is just after World War I. Now as you can see here, this is a scene from one of the battlefields from World War I, and it was at that period in time the most devastating conflict in human history. Millions of soldiers died throughout Europe and from different countries from around the world, including millions of civilians also. Now after the war, after the surrender of Germany, the treaty was signed at the Palace of Versailles in France, hence the Treaty of Versailles. And it was during this period, in the palace itself, that we have the so-called Big Three. You can see here we have got George Clemenceau, the President of France. He was the most aggressive person within the negotiations. He was the one that actually wanted to crush Germany and bring it to its knees. He wanted massive reparations. He wanted to totally destroy the German army, even make the area of Rhineland an independent country. Then we have Lloyd George in the centre, the Prime Minister of Britain. He wanted to make sure that Germany was punished, but he didn't want Germany to be crippled to such an extent that it couldn't trade with Britain. Britain wanted Germany as a strong trading partner that would help employment within the country. And then on the right we've got President Wilson, the man known as an idealist. America was only in World War I for about 9 or 10 months. He wanted a kind of peace treaty that would actually help to rebuild Germany, not punish it, but actually help it to recover. And then ultimately, during this period, the German people were actually enraged by the Treaty of Versailles. They felt that it was far too harsh. They felt that it was crippling their economy because the reparations was far too high. Germany was already nearly bankrupt from 4 years of total war. The food supplies were very short. Land was taken away from them. Their army was being reduced to only 100,000 soldiers. Germany had a strong military tradition. It was like a Premier League country at the time. What this Treaty of Versailles actually did to Germany was to reduce it to a lower league country. And the Germans felt humiliated and embarrassed. Many people actually argued that the Treaty of Versailles was one of the causes of World War II, because the German people wanted revenge for the land losses and the food shortages and the problems with finance, etc. during this period. So in a moment, once I've stopped talking, it will be time for you to press pause. That's when you will begin to analyse this source for yourself and begin to consider some of the symbols and the meanings hidden within it. Let me just draw your attention down to the bottom where the writing is. Think about what importance this will have. It's a cartoon published in Simplicissimus, a German magazine from June 1919. Why could that be important? Think about who these characters are in here dressed in black. Why might they be dressed in black? Think about their facial expressions as well as their posture. Think about who these people are. Think about what they're holding and what that could represent. Consider what this device is here and who this could be here within the middle and why the hands might be bound. So it's now time for you to press pause and do your own thinking with regards to some of the hidden symbols within the cartoon. So let's have a close look at the cartoon itself. Immediately you should notice that this is a German cartoon, published at the time of when the treaty was signed in June of 1919. And this is important because it gives us an insight into the attitudes of the German people, or at least the German media from the time. Also, what should come to your attention immediately is this device here. This is what's known as a guillotine. It's a famous historical device that's been used in the past as a tool of execution, and it was used to execute or chop off people's heads, guilty prisoners. And the guilty prisoner that's being represented here is actually Germany. The fact that it's half naked could represent that it's been humiliated in some way, and of course with its hands being tied, this shows how helpless Germany actually was. Some contextual knowledge is this idea that the treaty was a process that was done to Germany. It didn't have a say whatsoever in it. The body postures of the characters around it is really important. These is clearly it's the big three. We have here Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson has his body posture shows as though he's trying to reason with the other two, as though he's trying to explain something. Contextual knowledge to back this up is that Woodrow Wilson didn't want a harsh treaty that punished Germany. Here we have Lloyd George, and the fact that he's holding some kind of scroll could be the Treaty of Versailles itself, or even a death warrant. The treaty could be represented there as the death warrant. That's actually signing the death of Germany itself. And here we have Clemenceau. Clemenceau is the person who's holding the rope that will actually bring the guillotine down and chop the head of Germany. Some contextual knowledge from the time is that Clemenceau was clearly the driving force behind such a harsh treaty. Yes, Lloyd George wanted more of a lenient treaty. He still wanted Germany to be punished, but he wanted a strong trading partner to help Britain's economy. So overall, the message of the cartoon is that Germany is helpless, and it's being treated like a prisoner who's facing his death as a result of such a harsh Treaty of Versailles. So whenever we're answering an exam question, we always need to consider the mark scheme. We need to think like the examiner does, and this will give you a boost within the exam itself in order to maximise the marks. If you simply write down what the message of the cartoon is without backing it up or using contextual knowledge, you're just going to get 1 or 2 marks out of 6. You should be able to, by now, use source details in order to back up the points that you're saying. So, for example, you should be able to mention who these 3 people are, the big 3. Consider their body posture. Consider who this person is here, clearly representing Germany. The hands are tied. Talk about this, the historical device as device that cuts people's heads off in order to punish criminals, and mention where the source comes from. You don't have to mention all of these different points. 2 or 3 should be enough, so don't worry about including all the different points within it. And then finally, of course, you need to mention contextual knowledge, points from the time. Right at the end, or you could do it throughout your answer, mention how Clemenceau was the person who was the driving force to get a really harsh treaty against Germany. Include a point about how President Wilson wanted a more lenient one. He wanted to help rebuild Germany and help it prosper, help it to contribute to world peace. You could also mention how Lloyd George had a role to play. He had to be seen to be punishing Germany because the British public were putting pressure on him to do so, but he also wanted a much lenient one. So overall, make sure that you answer the question, use the source details to back it up, and you must get in contextual knowledge from the time in order to get those maximum marks.